Corley, I can apologise for the lateness of the statement, and it should be being placed in members' pigeonholes as we speak. And apologies to yourself for it not getting to you sooner. It's a rapidly changing situation and things are evolving, so we're trying to be as up to date and give people as much information as possible. I'm making this joint statement today on behalf of myself and the First Minister. The entire Executive is behind the enormous efforts being made to keep us all safe. I want to thank you for accommodating our statement today. We recognise that our people need information and that we have given a commitment that we will update the Assembly and our people as often and as speedily as we can. Undoubtedly, things will change and develop on a daily and certainly even on an hour-to-hour basis, so we're going to need to keep people up to date to keep people safe. Very sadly, we had our second COVID-19 fatality yesterday. The thoughts and prayers of all of us across this Assembly will be with the family of the loved ones who have deceased. The current situation as of 2 p.m. on Sunday the 22nd of March, testing has resulted in 20 new positive cases, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to 128. The total number of tests completed is 2,484. Our messages today are simple and they can't be repeated often enough. And can I commend all elected representatives for trying to get that message out there to their communities. Stay at home if you can, wash your hands. If you have to go out, practice social distancing. Stay apart, protect our health service so our health service can protect us. These are not normal times. This is a time for cool, calm heads and for big, warm hearts. The First Minister and myself were so grateful to everyone who did the right thing yesterday on Mother's Day, despite the difficulties, but they did the right thing to keep mothers and other vulnerable people safe. We definitely understand the difficulty that there was for many, many people, but it was really heartwarming whenever you saw a number of images of people, how they got in touch with their mums. And we're grateful to all those mothers out there who actually worked on the front line in critical services for us yesterday. This is a demonstration of us at our best. We know there are more difficult developments to come, and in our families and our communities there is confusion and there's hurt. There are financial worries about our loved ones and worries about our neighbours and our communities. Please, we are asking everyone to do the right thing, to carry on doing the right things in the weeks ahead. Extraordinary times need extraordinary steps, and ministers and officials are meeting every morning and will be offering very regular updates to the Assembly and to the media. We have made the health and well-being of our citizens our #1 priority. Our economic well-being and the well-being of society are also at the heart of our discussions. We need to maintain, as far as we possibly can, other critical services, and we need to look after our people who are working on the front line. We are taking part in COBRA discussions, and the announcements from London are being supplemented by local solutions that we need for the problems that we are facing here. We are looking far beyond the normal ways of working and policy development and how decisions are made. We are doing things now in days and hours what would normally have taken months and weeks. We are being responsible with our finances, making sure that decisions are quick and the front line has what it needs to keep people well. That requires new, real-time thinking, and it's absolutely the right thing to do in these circumstances. We are working across departmental boundaries in new and important ways. To be absolutely clear, it is the top priority to protect our health service because they protect us. We need to slow down the spread of COVID-19 by keeping the pressures on our health service to an absolute minimum. We must make space for our health service to look after those who will need care now and in coming weeks. That is so vitally important. This is about keeping people alive. This is about keeping people alive. This is about making space for our nurses, for our doctors, our hospital cleaners, our social care staff to do their job and follow their vocations. We are asking an awful lot of them now, so we need to do everything that we can to support them. Other key decisions, such as the closure of schools and limiting pupil attendance to key workers, are focused on protecting our health service so that they can protect us. We totally appreciate that this is a difficult situation for parents. Please think about and understand the motivation. Closing pubs and restaurants is about keeping people well and protecting our health service. We had clear requests to pubs and restaurants on Friday to please close. We were grateful to all those who closed their doors, to those who distributed their supplies to those in need, and to those who are looking after their staff. We say to parents and to young people, please do the right things now that the schools are closed. Young people are not immune to COVID-19. COVID does not care about your age, so you need to care about yourself and the potential for you to catch it and to pass it on. Young people need to follow exactly the same advice. The schools are shut, but education, learning and planning for your future should be at the heart of what you're doing in the coming weeks. We are asking parents to help get our advice across to young people. Stay at home, wash your hands and stay apart. The economic support which will be coming available will help cushion our businesses and family incomes. It will help to keep our economy able to function again when normality finally returns. But we are conscious that we can't entirely insulate ourselves from our economy, from the pain and the hurt that COVID-19 brings. It's a dreadful disease with dreadful consequences. But there are many things we can do now. The Minister for Health has already taken steps to free up resources in our health service to provide hospital care for the most seriously COVID-19 patients. All non-urgent services have been reduced, and steps are being taken to make greater use of the telephone and other digital technology for patients who need follow-up as outpatients. Trust will be working to ensure prompt discharge of medically well patients from hospitals to ensure beds are available for any increase in admissions. Initial support measures have been announced for businesses, both in terms of grants, the support around workers' salary costs and the measures to provide relief around rates. These will provide much-needed breathing space for our business community. We are continuing to work with the British Government to further enhance the assistance available, and we are lobbying hard to ensure our businesses and workers receive the support that they need. The Minister for Education has taken steps to close schools to pupils, with the exemption of those pupils who are children of key workers who have no other alternative childcare provision. We appreciate that this causes disruption, but it is a necessary step. The Minister for Education is working with the Council for the Curriculum of Examinations and Assessments and other awarding bodies to put in place robust processes for awarding grades. We also recognise that there are a number of vulnerable children and young people in our education system. The Minister for Education and the Minister for Communities are working together to put in place alternative arrangements around free school meals, and we expect to hear more about that throughout the course of today. The Minister for Education is also working with the Minister for Health to ensure that vulnerable children and young people in the education system continue to have access to the services that are necessary for their well-being. The Minister for Communities is working to develop a COVID-19 community contingency fund to help groups who are supporting those who are socially isolated, struggling financially or who can't access food supplies. She has also made arrangements to suspend face-to-face assessment for benefits over the next 3 months and has temporarily removed the waiting period statutory sick pay and new employment support allowance claims. The Minister for Infrastructure has temporarily relaxed the legislation around drivers' hours. This will be an important measure to ensure that the supply chains can continue to operate effectively and to maintain flows of food and vital supplies. This change now applies to the items being delivered directly to consumers' homes and will help support those who are self-isolating. The Minister of Finance and the Minister for the Economy and the Minister for the Infrastructure are also working hard to support our airports and are pressing the British Government to provide specific support for the aviation sector. This sector is facing significant challenges at present, but it is vital to ensure that air connectivity is maintained both in the short and longer term. Our aviation industry will be essential in the times ahead. The Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has put in place measures to protect citizens and staff accessing DAERA direct services. We also recognise that to ensure the best response we must not work in isolation. Through the North-South Ministerial Council, we have agreed that everything possible will be done in coordination and cooperation with the Irish Government and our Executive, and with the active involvement of the health administrations across both jurisdictions. And a total societal approach is the only way forward. Every single person in our society has something to do. Every single person in our society has a very important thing to do now to help us to beat COVID-19. We need all people to follow the advice. Staying home, washing hands and practical social distancing. We need responsible shopping. Please do not be involved in irresponsible shopping. There is enough food to go around for everyone. Be generous to others by only buying what you need. Leave supplies on the shelves for the elderly, the vulnerable and our frontline workers. We do not need our nurses and our doctors after working long shifts, and all of our people who work in the health service, our hospital cleaners and those who look after the most vulnerable, for our families and for communities to, at the end of a day, to go to the shops and not be able to buy food for themselves or for their families. Please be kind, look out for your neighbours and the most vulnerable in your communities. If we are able to, leave 1 or 2 items in the food bank box in your own community. I suspect most, if not all, families have had to think about how they would cope if this situation unfolds, or as this situation unfolds. And I would be confident that most, if not all, people have already thought about how they can help someone who's less fortunate. We can do these good things because we are part of the giant spirit that makes this a very special place. This situation will bring out some wonderful acts of kindness, of that I have no doubt, and we can see that already. At the end of this, we all want to look back and say that we all did the right things. Tougher times are coming. We can look at other countries and other places in the world to know that we are only at the start of what is going to be the most difficult of times. We can't make this situation go away unless we all do the right things now. Every day where we don't follow the advice, the risk increases. Please help us to protect our health service and our health workers so that they can help us and our families. We realise that we're sending out very difficult and very worrying messages, but we will get through this. We'll get through it when we work together. We will come out of this. We will come out of this because we have looked to every part of society to play a role. And that's because this is a great place and we have such a wonderful spirit in our people. Can Corley, myself and the First Minister and the entire Executive recognise we do not have all the answers today. We are working tirelessly to do the right things. We're asking all of our people to work with us and to do the right things. Our commitment to the Assembly is that we will keep you up to date as things develop. We thank you again for the opportunity to update you today.
Thank you. And I call Colin McGrath.
Much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Deputy First Minister and First Minister for the update from the Department today. And I also echo the condolences that are sent to the families of those that have passed away as a result of this virus. This is a worrying time for people, and as the Deputy First Minister said, information is key, and I welcome all the announcements so far, but I would ask if some consideration could be given to funneling the information through to MLAs, because we're literally being contacted by hundreds of people, and we're having to go on to news websites and go on to Twitter feeds to try and find the information, and if there was a way of getting information funnelled out, it would be greatly appreciated. But I am somewhat concerned for our health sector staff. They are very worried that they don't have the equipment that they need, and that there are many carers that are going in and out of people's homes as well, where the only protection they have is a set of gloves, and there can be up to 4 people coming in, and that is very worrying for those people in the houses. Testing also remains a major issue. If we don't know who has the illness, we don't know how to isolate. People isolating for 14 days at a time. If they are in the health sector, that means that they're taken off the wards, off the floor for 14 days. A test could be turned around in 48 hours and get those people back onto the floor if they don't have the illness. And I would just echo the remarks that have already been made and say that we need to get a clear message as an Executive and as an Assembly out to curtail people socialising in this time. To see resorts in constituencies like mine, such as Newcastle yesterday, absolutely jam-packed, to see the beaches with tailbacks for people trying to get into them. People have to realise that they have to heed the advice of staying at home, and if they have to go out, it's simply to go out for work, it's simply to go out to the shop or to care for somebody, and really not for much other reasons beyond that. And just finally, Mr. Speaker, I hope that some departments do not use this crisis as an opportunity to try and settle some old goals in terms of relocating and closing down services. I'm hearing some very worrying remarks about the Down Hospital, and I have had many people, many staff contacting me, and if things have to be done for safety, that's perfect as long as that's detailed out, but I hope that there isn't an opportunity being used on the cover of this crisis to realign services and leave the rural areas deprived. Thank you.
And thanks to the Chair of the Committee for all of that. Firstly, just to concur and to restate again, we can't say it strongly enough. We need people to follow the advice, and some of the actions of some individuals over the weekend was actually endangering lives. Going to beaches, going to caravan parks, doing any of those things, that's actually putting more people's lives at risk. So we collectively, as an Executive and as an Assembly, need to send out the strongest possible message. You are killing people by doing these things. This is a time not for soft language, this is a time for us to be very straight with people. So we need to keep driving home that message. In terms of the information, I understand this is frustrating. It's frustrating for me. because we're rapidly involved in a situation that's changing minute by minute, hour by hour. We are endeavouring to try and pull that all together, and what we're going to have is a one information portal so that people can go to in terms of trying to get information, whether it's in terms of the health advice or economic advice and benefits, the school situation, if you're a key worker, all those things. So one-stop shop, and that will be launched over the coming days. Actually, I think it's actually went up already just this morning, but it's being built upon. So that will be helpful, and we'll make sure that all members get notification actually how to go about getting onto that piece of information, because it's vital, because everybody has so many questions right now, and it's just so difficult to try and get that out there because there's a lot of noise, and we have to give people the key essential information. So hopefully this will be helpful. We're also going to roll out a communication plan. We've taken steps to enhance the communication output, so you'll see a significant difference over the course of the next 2 days over the Executive's response to make sure people are getting the key messages and showing them where to go to get them as well. So people will see a great improvement in that over the course of the next couple of days. On PPE, we're taking this very seriously. We're actually at a meeting this morning. We've been told that through finance they've been able to secure a contract for additional PPE. So that's good news. And we have to continue to keep these things under review. It's crucially important that we have enough, that people aren't fearful that we don't have enough, that the staff aren't fearful that we don't have enough, and we'll continue to work our way through that. The very issue that you referred to of carers, people on the front line going home to home, they need protection too. And it's important that we have sufficient stock for them across the whole range of protection equipment, and I can definitely give assurances that that's what we are working day and night to make sure that they have that. On the testing, we have to do more. We have to do more. I mean, the World Health Organization is saying test, test, test. They're saying test, isolate, trace. That's what we have to do. So we're continuing to work with the Health Minister. We have, obviously, there's been significant ramping up of testing, but we need to do more. It's not there yet. It's not enough. But we can assure you that we're going to work to make sure that that is the case and that we get there. So I just think this is a challenging time. It's not normal business. We can't behave like normal, because it's not normal times. We have to behave, we have to be responsive, we have to act decisively, we have to be quick on our feet, but we need to tell the public that every decision that we take, we'll take it in the best interest of people. We'll take it in the interest, because every decision I would have to take as a minister, I'd be thinking about my family too. So every decision that we take collectively here, then that's how we'll be guided.
Can I call Palm Cameron?
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the First and Deputy First Ministers for their presence here in the Chamber today, and could I agree with the Deputy First Minister about the need for testing, especially in order to keep our key workers working where we need them most. Another scenario has been raised with me today, and that's around the issue of MOT testing, where a key worker has got in touch with me to say that she and her husband are both key workers. Her car needs MOT'd because of the MOT difficulties. She's now not able to get her car MOT'd until April, which takes either herself as a key worker or her husband as a key worker off the road until then. Is there any way that either key workers could get priority in this, or indeed I would like to ask the question of whether it's actually appropriate that we're still actually continuing with MOT tests at this critical time?
Minister.
So Minister for Infrastructure Nicola Mallon is actually looking at all of these things, and she's working her way just through that, and I'll raise your concerns, because obviously we've prioritised protection for key workers in terms of trying to facilitate them in schools, to assist them to be able to get to work. So I think the logic follows through that we would also do the same in terms of MOT testing. So I'm very happy to talk to the Minister for Infrastructure for that, and I'm quite sure she'll be very positively open to doing whatever is necessary to make sure that we protect or we support those workers to do the work that we're asking them to do.
Nicole Martin Anderson.
I want to acknowledge the leadership that has been given by the Joint First Ministers. I think that yesterday, above all, I was inundated with people commenting on how you interacted with each other and the public. So I just want to make that general point. I think most people are listening to you. Most people are taking your advice. However, I would like you to comment a bit more about some of those people who are treating this as an inconvenience. And we've heard about some of the behaviour that's happening across sites. I also think that most people are hearing how we have a responsibility to stop the transmission, and all of us have a role to play in that. So it's going back to what you said about test, 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 and the intensification for that. I'm sure, like many of the MLAs, I'm being inundated with people demanding that we test, we trace and we isolate in order to stop the transmission. So it's I know you've answered some of that, but it's to give reassurance to people. Just like test centres are opening in the 26 counties, there'll be more test centres opening here, and we'll have an all-Ireland approach, because politics cannot come into this. This is about protecting people's lives.
Minister.
And thanks to the member for her question. Firstly, to say, you can't say it strongly enough, people being reckless and ignoring the advice are killing people. And we can't say that. We need people to hear that, because this is what we're talking about. This is not planning for something that may happen, could happen somewhere down the line in the future. This is here. This is now. We're in the week now where it is spreading without people even noticing. And I think it's so important that we collectively take every bit of opportunity that we have to drive home the message, and ask others to join us in driving home that message. And I know that we all have our different heroes in life, and people look up to different people, and I really welcome the fact that a number of sports personalities and other people have actually come forward and to drive home that message, and we implore them to keep doing that over the course of the next difficult days and weeks that we have ahead of us. So just let's all be consistent in driving home the message. The testing is so important, because, like, even over the weekend, I spoke to a midwife whose child has symptoms, so the family are now isolated. She now can't go to work. So the testing is about trying to get our health service staff back into work. If the daughter was tested, then she would be able to get herself into work. So it's so important that we ramp up the testing, that we do it with speed, and myself and the First Minister are working on this as we speak.
Nicole Magnesbitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Deputy First Minister for her statement. I think probably the most useful thing I could say on behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party is again to thank the wonderful staff of our National Health Service, to applaud every citizen and group of citizens who have shown the finest side of humanity by helping others, and to wish the Deputy First Minister and the First Minister and the Executive Godspeed in this uncharted and unprecedented journey.
Thank you, Minister.
Can I thank the member for his comments and concur with him in terms of the health service staff, who are absolutely amazing, and they are in for tough times ahead, and we have to do everything we can to support them, and really very much welcome your warm words, because we have tough decisions to take in the time ahead, and it's going to take a collective, joined-up effort from us all to be able to get ourselves through the other side of this. But it's important to say that we will come out the other side of this, and we'll have a lot of building to do. We'll have a lot of people who will have lost their loved ones, and we'll have a societal challenge in terms of trying to build it all up again. But we can do that, and we can do that collectively, and I have no doubt of all of that.
Thank you. Colin Mervyn Story.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the First and Deputy First Minister for the update to the House today, and also place on record our appreciation to the Executive colleagues in relation to the way in which they are endeavouring to deal with what everyone will concur are unprecedented times. Deputy First Minister said that we will look back and say that we did the right thing. Will she, and she may be aware that I tabled a matter of the day in this House that was rejected by the Speaker last week, calling for a day of prayer. She will also be aware that I wrote to both the First and Deputy First Ministers at the weekend, encouraging them to call our people to recognise that there is a God in heaven, and that at a time whenever we are facing a crisis, that people should resort to the greatest place of safety, which is calling upon the God of heaven to intervene and to earnestly pray that we will see the other side of this, and that out of that prayer there will come to all our families the peace, the confidence and the comfort that we need, ever mindful of what the Scripture says, that if my people which are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, then God has promised to hear from heaven, to forgive their sin and to heal their land. It's that healing that we also need along with the work that we collectively all must do.
Minister.
Thanks to the member for his comments. I haven't received your letter, but I'm sure I'll pick it up. I think we're all going to need look to our inner strength throughout the period ahead, and I think that we all are going to have to look very deep down into our soul to be able to support not just our own families but also everybody else around us. This is going to be the most trying of times. It's actually an understatement to say it's an understatement to say it's unprecedented. But this is the challenge of our lifetime, and we're all going to have to work with each other, support each other, look out for those who are more vulnerable in society, do everything that we can. And we're also going to have to be a bit creative about how we reach out to people, because not everybody has somebody. That's the reality of life, an unfortunate reality. Not everybody has somebody. So we all need to be thinking about others as well at this time.
Thank you. And I call Daniel McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to begin by applauding the tremendous efforts of the First and Deputy First Minister throughout what has been a very difficult and challenging few weeks. It comes as a great relief that this House is restored and that we do have an executive in place, and both the First and Deputy First Minister working together throughout this tremendously difficult and unprecedented challenge. This is, as the Deputy First Minister rightly said, the challenge of our lifetime, and it has instilled a huge amount of fear in our community from people of all walks of life, and even in church leaders as well. Deputy First Minister, I just want to know, in terms of powers, I know there's a discussion in relation to the COVID bill today, but what powers has your office got to enforce a lockdown of Northern Ireland, for want of a better description? And also, Deputy First Minister, you have put out the clear message, and have continued to repeat that message, and that message does and has resonated with a large percentage of the population across Northern Ireland. But there's still an element of people who just are not listening, and it frustrates me deeply to see, even yesterday, huge numbers of people continue about their business as though this is just a flu, or some even treating this as though it's a holiday. We need to make this very clear that this is a life or death situation. People will die around us, and we're very worried about that. Also, in relation to the advice, Dr. Gabriel Scally on the news during the week was very good, and he said that his advice to the public would be to treat this or behave as though we already have it. And in doing so, people then will isolate and realise that that's the best possible measure that they could take. Staying indoors is the solution to this. Testing as well. Even within the Health Service, Deputy First Minister, a huge amount of people are very concerned about the lack of testing. Now, I know that is going to be largely resolved, but I spoke with a nurse yesterday who was in tears on the phone to me, very frightened because she sees in front of her what is coming, and she also feels the pressure now. She's entirely dedicated, absolutely, to saving lives and supporting people, but her mother and father and her family are worried about her in turn. And I worry too about the mental health and the impact that has on those in frontline services. And I know that you'll continue doing all you can to support them. And as a final point, Deputy First Minister, information for businesses. With every problem that occurs, we're faced with 100 questions emanating from that one problem. And I'm continually having, as are other members in this House, questions raised by business owners, business leaders, people that are self-employed, looking for reassurance as to what's going to happen in relation to the coming weeks. Now, there is information coming out, but there needs to be clarity about how people can access that necessary provision that has been gratefully granted, Deputy First Minister. And a final point is just to ensure that we as a House do work together, all politics aside now. This is us standing shoulder to shoulder for the greater good of the people of this place. And I know that if we do focus our attention strongly in protecting human life, that we will save countless lives. And again, to thank you both for your leadership.
Minister.
Thank you very much for all of that and for your positive comments. Can I say that in terms of the lack of information, or I suppose the desire for information, everybody wants the answers. You're right, whenever something's announced then there's a lot of questions comes in the back of it. We're trying to have all that collated and put up onto this one-stop shop portal, so I think that will be a game changer in terms of people being able to be signposted to the right place, get exactly the right information that we know that everybody wants. On the issue of the self-employed, that is, the economic package last week was very much welcomed, and it gives that assurity to people that their livelihoods will be protected. And I think that's obviously a very welcome thing, but the self-employed category is still to be resolved, and we need to see that resolved, because there are still companies that are out working today, and that shouldn't be the case. But we need to be able to try and find a way to support them. So the Executive has made the case for the self-employed and will continue to do so. Actually, as a matter of fact, I think the junior ministers are on a call right as we speak now, and I think that's part of the conversation which they're having to make that case for the self-employed. You're right in terms of the points on testing, well made. I absolutely concur. We concur, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that's significantly ramped up. And in terms of mental health, we all need to mind our mental health at this time. Every one of us, even, and everybody else out there, because when people are isolated and cut off from their normal circles, where you get your bit of activity, people who go to bingo, go to a community hall, you can't get to do any of those things right now, so that's going to be difficult for people. So we'll have to be creative, and I have to say I've been so impressed with people coming up with different things online, and we need to try and do a lot more of that as we go through what's going to be very dark and difficult days. In terms of emergency legislation and what powers we have, obviously that piece of legislation is going through, which will give us a lot more powers to be able to move to shut things down as required. What we need to be able to have is the tools and the powers to take the right action at the right time, and that's what this legislation will give us. So we very much welcome the fact that we're going to have those measures on it, which are going to be temporary, so they're here for a period of time. They're to get us through this, and I think they're very proportionate to the threat that we face. They're quite stark, they're quite draconian powers, and never at any other time would you allow pieces of legislation like this to go through. But this is, the most extraordinary of times, so we need extraordinary legislation, and that's what we'll have. So that'll all come into place. I think it's tomorrow, and that gives us even more certainty to be able to take the right action at the right time.
Call Robin Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister for this statement today. It is indeed helpful, but it's also encouraging as well to see the actions that the First and Deputy First Minister are taking. Many points have been made around the Chamber, Mr. Speaker, and running through all of that has been the concern for the individual, concern for society, concern for our health workers, concern for our teachers, concern for those who are working in the supermarkets and the small food shops and the chemist shops, all very much on the front line of this crisis. And I think there have been references made to the health crisis as it is, but aren't we, Deputy First Minister, going to be facing another health crisis further down the line when this has been solved, but the impact on the health of those who have been serving in the front line? And as we know, soldiers returning from war suffer from PTSD. It is likely that many in the health service and the other services that are fighting this battle are likely to suffer from something similar. And aren't we in a place now to start thinking about when we finish this crisis, what the outcomes and how we're going to treat those who are fighting this battle on our behalf?
Yeah, absolutely correct. People will have to make very tough decisions. People working in the health service on the front line will have to make very tough decisions. They'll be working in the most challenging of circumstances. They will be, trying to support patients. That's their number one priority, is always about patients. They'll be dealing with people's families. It's going to be very distressing. So we have to mind them. We have to mind our health service workers. We have to be thinking about when we come out the other side, and how we respond to all of that. Life as we know it has changed. That is the reality of what we're dealing with. We will come out the other side, and we'll have to support everybody who's been involved in the front line, and we'll have to support everybody to rebuild again on the other side of this. But our priority for now has to be about how can we save lives. And we can save lives, and everybody out there has the opportunity to save lives if they follow the advice, if they do the right thing, if they make sure that they wash their hands, and if they stay apart. We can actually bring down the level of deaths.
I call Jim Allister.
I want to direct attention, if I might, to the knock-on effect within our health service. What should I say, Minister, to the family of the young 32-year-old mother who have contacted my office. She's a cancer patient, very serious cancer. She's got a 2-year-old child, and she's just been told that her chemotherapy is going to end because choices have to be made as to who will be treated. And in regard to factories, we've talked much about social distancing, yet I've had contact this morning from a worker in a production factory in Ballymena telling me that the production line continues as was, people working elbow to elbow. What instructions have been given to factories in that situation?
Can I say, just in terms of factories, myself and the First Minister intend to just later on today, we're looking at making some more announcements just around the thing we both said yesterday on Sunday Politics, that non-essential services should be shut down. It should be nothing else, only essential services operating right now. And we're working our way through that. Now, these powers that we're going to have, additional powers, will also be important in order for us to be able to take things to where they need to go to. What do you say? What can you say? Like, what can you say to that person? These are the challenges which we're going to have to deal with.
Members, take a raise for a moment or two. Thank you.
That's the kind of situation that we're going to have to deal with. That's the kind of situation that staff who work on the front line are going to have to deal with, and that's why we have to mind our healthcare workers through this period. The point that Robin made around, you know, how do we mind their mental health, and when they come out the other side of this, this is the kind of stuff that is going to be so challenging and so difficult, and there aren't any good answers. There aren't any good answers to those kind of questions.
Okay, I call Jerry Carroll.
Your answer so far. I mean, there's a perception, testing was already referenced, there is a perception that much more needs to be done in society around testing to make it more readily available to everybody, to roll out in a much more quicker and rapid way, especially for our NHS workers who are some who are off work because they are showing symptoms but may not have COVID-19. Has there been any discussions in the executive about requisitioning private healthcare facilities to ensure that everything possible is being done so we can adequately test, quickly test, and ensure that public health is coming before private profit?
Yes, the Department of Health has published its surge plan, and we said that's going to be a living document and it'll have to constantly be refreshed and looked at. And we're going to have to do that because we're going to need those hospital beds. So we're working our way through all these things, but we're going to need the hospital beds in the private sector. We're going to need every available resource open to us. And I think, to be fair, I have to say I've been really astounded by the public good. People who've been offering up, you know, hotels that have closed, people have been offering up their services, their kitchens, their laundries, their everything. People have been absolutely amazing. And we're trying to, because we have to think outside the box, we're trying to look at how do we collate all those sources of information or of offers of people who want to help us, and then try to funnel that through the right department who it will be helpful to. So yes, we are discussing these things, and yes, we will essentially need those beds.
I call Claire Sugden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I just want to make a point around the leadership of both the Deputy First Minister and the First Minister. It certainly hasn't gone unnoticed by my constituents. And, I think from my perspective, it's something that I always saw was there. But I think moving forward, this is something we need to build on when we do pass this difficult time. I appreciate the Deputy First Minister's comments around the communications portal. I think that's critical. We as MLAs have a representative voice for the people that we represent to an extent that won't be directly finding its way to the executive table. And I think those ideas, those gaps within the policies that are being announced in the quick way that they are, may help the executive identify where we can better support what they're announcing moving forward. So, I do welcome that opportunity. Perhaps this has already been raised, but I would make the point around trying to find more support for the self-employed and sole traders. I do appreciate that it's not within the financial gift of the Northern Ireland Executive to bring forward those measures themselves. But how are you engaging with the UK Government in trying to ensure that they are getting those supports? We know here in Northern Ireland that it's almost like comparing apples with pears or with oranges in terms of what exists in England and Wales. And we have a significant number of self-employed and sole traders who are not getting supported because the measures that seem to have been announced now are for those businesses that have a premises or have employees. And I think if we're going to underpin our economy as much as helping those individuals, I think that's something that we as an Assembly need to encourage the UK Government to support. Thank you.
Yes, can I thank the member for our question? And we are, firstly, in terms of the portal, with the one-stop shop with all the information, that's going to be continually built upon. So perhaps we need to find a way for Assembly members to flag up questions that aren't reflected in that. So we'll open up a source for all MLAs to be able to contribute that this is a commonly asked question and we need to get an answer to it. So we'll lend ourselves to do that. And in terms of the economic package, we are continuing. I know that the Finance Minister, Economy Minister have all been in touch with the Treasury over the weekend from Friday's announcement to say we have a gap in terms of self-employed and we need to have that addressed. And as I said, there's a COBRA call as we speak, and I know that our junior ministers are raising that as well. So we have to continue to champion the needs of the self-employed also, because when we come out the other side of this and we have to build, we want to be able to have people to have jobs to go back to. It's going to be a difficult enough and trying situation, but if we can, as best we can, support these people to maintain their operations so that when we come out the other side they have that there.
Thank you. I call Ms Paula Bradshaw.
Can I first of all place on record my condolences to the bereaved families? Very, very sad times, and I'm sure their passing was gravely felt by the healthcare family. I welcome the information you provided today regarding the self-employed and the efforts of the junior ministers. That's great, so I don't need to raise that. Two things, Minister. You will recall how well received the sign language interpreter was in the chamber whenever your colleague, the Communities Minister, was talking about the bill coming forward. Have you any plans to facilitate, notwithstanding social distancing, but to incorporate a sign language interpreter into your daily statements? And secondly, given the apparent lack among some young people about social distancing around the gravity of the situation, can one of your daily sessions facilitate questions like groups from the Northern Ireland Youth Forum and other peer groups there that we might find that young people start listening to? Because it's clear from some of the feedback and some of the imaging on social media over the weekend that a lot of young people are just not taking heed of this. Thank you.
Yes, we can certainly look at that. We need to try and find creative ways to engage with people, and we can sort of see if there's something we can do there. In terms of the sign language being part of our daily conference, we can certainly look at that, of course, because we need to make sure we're getting our message out to everybody. One of the things with our new communication plan that's going to be rolled out in all the TV ads, there will be a signer as part and parcel of that, and I think that's very important, so we had recognised it for that. As to whether or not it would be practical for you to be able to do that as a part of a press conference, I'm not sure, but certainly we'll certainly look at it.
Mr. Jonathan Buckley.
Deputy Speaker, and again I thank the First Minister and Deputy First Minister for their presence today. It is true in situations like this we do see the best and the worst in humanity. The best in our own local health workers who we send to the front line to fight this virus at this time, and I want to pay tribute to them because I've seen personally what they've done in my own constituency through Craigavon Area Hospital. They're truly heroes of our time. And I think whenever we do pass this awful period, it will be said that never has so much been owed by so many to so few. And it was with that in regard, Minister, and I watched how you've echoed this point. It's key now that our healthcare professionals receive the testing that they need, but also, more importantly, even at this stage, the vital PPE supplies, which many of them are crying out for, and I know that that work is ongoing. But again, the worst in society, as we watched over the weekend and how people openly flaunted the recommendation to socially isolate and keep social distancing, more has to be done to encourage everyone to take this as seriously as possible at this time. But I want to just lay upon you the key message from many of my constituents who are worried for their income. And while I recognise, and I think the entire House will recognise, the blessing that was that huge financial package from the Chancellor, because it really did put a lot of people at ease regarding day-to-day incomes. But the self-employed, which represent a huge part of our economy and our society, they feel vulnerable. Their families feel vulnerable at this time, understandably. And I know that a lot of work has been going on by executive colleagues to try and address this issue. But I would plead with you all to put this as a matter of priority and ensure that those of the self-employed nature have some form of cover in these deeply uncertain times. Thank you.
Yes, and I concur, and we'll be doing everything that we can to make sure we get supports for the self-employed, because that allows us then to ensure that there's economic security for people right across the board, and then all the measures which we take. Obviously, people are less anxious about their own incomes and putting food in their families' mouths. So I think that just to restate that. And can I also say just that we have 2 sign language interpreters actually, so just to clarify that point for Paula, and also to say that we're going to do this daily press conference to give people information every day at the same time. It'll be live streamed, so people are able to keep up to date with just anything that's happened throughout the 24 hours period cycle. That we're going to do this every day.
Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker, thank you to the Deputy First Minister and indeed the First Minister for coming here today when their time is precious. I first of all want to congratulate them on the last day or two and the improved commitment to giving a joined-up, serious, humane message to the people of Northern Ireland. It is completely critical, and I suppose I'd encourage them to keep it up, and I know in the days and weeks ahead it's going to be very difficult. In a sense, in Northern Ireland we have a completely unique political context because we have a unique society. The old Irish saying, we live in the shadow of one another, is one that we should bear in mind, and in a sense that unique political context, that unique societal context might be one that we can draw strength from. We know that we share things, we know we have to work together. That's something we as a society have learned. Hopefully we can draw strength from that in the weeks and months ahead, and I encourage both the First and Deputy First Minister in their endeavours to do that. I just want to ask a few specific questions about a couple of specific issues. So one is about engagement with particular companies, manufacturers of things which we know we need and we know are critical in the days ahead. One are ventilators. We've talked about the need for all-island working, all-Ireland partnership. One of the biggest manufacturers of ventilators in the world is based in Galway. That's Medtronic. What conversations have happened with them and with the Irish Government to expedite, frankly, them giving us ventilators? Number 2 is Randox, who are a major diagnostics producer based in County Antrim. I don't mean to use the bully pulpit here to name individual firms, but I'd like to know what conversations are happening. 3 is kind of apparel clothing manufacturers, who I know Niels over the weekend talked about them being in contact with Alton Galvin and seeing what kind of PPE equipment could be produced. What conversations are happening with them and other clothing manufacturers in Northern Ireland to get PPE equipment? We know they can be innovative, nimble when it comes to turning around their production lines, and with the social distancing, hopefully rules in those production lines. And then the final one are, in Ireland generally, and in Northern Ireland as well, we've seen all over the place, we've seen a flourishing in the last few years of distillation. We have many more craft distillers. They can make hand sanitizer. There are craft distillers not just in a certain North Antrim village, but all over the place. There are people making gin, vodka all over Northern Ireland. What are they doing to make hand sanitizer? We think that should be relatively straightforward in what conversations are happening. And then, so essentially, that's what I want to ask about all those manufacturers. But I also want to ask a question. Lots of colleagues have asked about testing, which is vital. In addition to testing, are we giving thought to ramping up contact tracing? One thing which we are fortunate about in Northern Ireland is that we have a relatively dispersed rural population. We have small, cohesive communities. I speak as someone who only relatively recently moved back here from London. On my morning commute into central London, if I had COVID-19 and was asymptomatic, God knows how many people I would have infected on the train and tube. Driving from where I live now, in the great constituency of South Belfast up to Stormont, it's very unlikely that I would, but that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be social distancing and staying at home. But we have small, cohesive communities. Very often people will know 50–75% of the people they might have met if they've tested positive. So in addition to testing, what are we doing about just setting up phone banks of people to do contact tracing and to say, who did you come in contact with in the last 24–48 hours? I think that's a strength we have in a relatively rural, dispersed population. We don't use very much public transport, which would be good in the long term, but right now it might be something that's a strange advantage. So what are we doing to ramp up contact tracing? Those are my three questions, really. What are we doing to talk to manufacturers? What are we doing about contact tracing? Thank you.
Thanks to the member for all those questions. So we are, again, back to the spirit of people and how good people are. So we've had numerous companies that have offered to repurpose what they do. Manufacturing companies offering to repurpose to build ventilators. We have people like O'Neill's and others who are offering to see if can they be of help in terms of PPE. And we're continuing those conversations. So there's been ongoing conversations both across Department of Finance, Department of Economy, InvestNI, others. So we're actively talking to a whole range of businesses. The company in Galway, Metronics, they are also being talked with as well, so they can certainly play a role. We have one company here in the north also who can help. So we're looking at everything because we're going to have to be prepared for this. So all those things are really helpful and being worked on as we speak. But certainly conversations with the likes of O'Neill's and all. They've been really good, like in terms of offering to be able to, they could make up scrubs, disposable scrubs, really quickly for staff. That would make all the difference because they're not worried then about washing uniforms and carrying things home with them and that. So we have to be creative about all those things. The hand sanitisers, I don't have much information about that apart from to say I know there is a company, I think perhaps in Derry, who are producing sanitisers, and we're looking at, even though it doesn't have the proper trademark that you normally would have, but we're not in normal times, so there's craft distillers. Yeah, we can. So we need. It's time for creative thinking. It's time for thinking outside the box. So we certainly can do those things. And then on the testing, and the World Health Organisation is very clear in saying, and even Mike Ryan said again at the weekend, that even if you're in lockdown, that's not enough. You need to test. You need to isolate. You need to trace, because we need to source this or follow this right through, and then actually remove those people away so that we can actually get on top of this. So those three things in my mind have to work together. It's not enough just to test, you have to do the other things as well. So we are in conversation and will continue to be in conversation with the Health Minister, with the Chief Medical Officer and with all those concerned. There was a piece of work done over the course of the last few days around the testing piece where the Chief Medical Officer brought together a group of people to look at how we can ramp this up and what we can do. So we'll be having a conversation on that hopefully later on today as well. So it's a movable feast. We're working our way through it, but certainly people are great. People are great. Like the way they've been offering to just like that turn their business from one thing to another just to meet the need that we're going to have.
Thank you very much, Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, and I would like to echo the words of other members within this chamber of thanks for the collective leadership that you have been shown in recent days. It's exactly what we need at this time, and also thanks to the officials. Policy decisions are being made in Northern Ireland at breakneck speed. It would take usually years to be made. They've been made in days, and I'd like to thank the officials for that. And also has been echoed the healthcare workers and the service they're given. I was particularly disappointed would be a diplomatic word to see the disrespect shown to our healthcare workers in recent days. I think some people are treating this as a national holiday rather than a national emergency. To see Crawfordsburn Country Park and Helens Bay car park overflowing, to see people bringing elderly relatives out for a walk in the country park is shameful. The vast majority of people in Northern Ireland are observing the guidance and showing respect to our healthcare workers, but seeing other people showing that disrespect really filled me with a lot of anger and shame that would be the situation. I know that 35 outdoor organisations have encouraged people to engage in exercise, but do that locally. You don't need to travel to the beach to do your exercise. Go out for your jog, take your dog for a walk. You don't need to go to the country park. You don't need to go to the beach. And just First question really is, when are we coming to a point where if people don't observe the guidance we're given to them, that we're going to have to close the beaches, we're going to have to close the parks, and just to see when the point we're going to get in relation to that. Last week also there was an announcement made in relation to grants for businesses, and that was very much welcome, but just to see whenabouts we're going to get a bit more information in terms of when they're going to be distributed, because the announcement which was made last Friday by the Chancellor of Exchequer in relation to PAYE is welcome, but that's not going to come in place really until April, and businesses need to have some money to assist with cash flow, and just to see whenabouts where we're going to be able to distribute those grants. There's also concerns that some organisations actually pay their rates as part of their rent and service charge to the landlord to ensure that the money goes directly to those businesses, and to do that. And lastly, just what representations can we collectively make to ensure self-employed are covered, because they are facing significant hardship. These are the backbone of many aspects of our economy, and see what way we can support it. But collective leadership is what we need here, and I really hope that today we do not see beaches packed, country parks packed, because that is shameful, it's disgraceful, it's disrespectful, and it's not what the Northern Ireland that I'm proud to be part of. Thank you.
Well, I think it's important to restate the fact that this is not a holiday, this is not school holidays, this is an emergency. And that's the message which people need to hear. We've talked about it, I agree. I mean, the numbers of people that went along to beaches and things like that over the weekend is just disgraceful. So we need to send a clear message from here, and all of us take every opportunity to use every fora that we have to make sure we drive that message home. I know that the Minister for Agriculture and Rural Affairs will probably make more commentary about this over the coming times in terms of things that were within his remit, within the department's remit. We know the councils have moved to close parks and public areas, which is all necessary things that need to happen. This is difficult. I understand it's difficult, and it's difficult to be cooped up in the house. It's difficult, you know, your children want exercise and all those things. But we cannot behave as normal here. We have to act in a way in which we have never acted before. This is ultimately about saving people's lives, and we just need to drive that message home. On the grants for businesses, we're working to get those out the door as quickly as possible. More details will be finalised over the course of this afternoon, but we're hopeful that grants will be processed and actually out the door, and then within a couple of days will actually be in people's bank accounts.
Can I start off by paying tribute once again to our healthcare workers who are facing a challenge that is unimaginable, and I want to wish them all well with that challenge. I also want to applaud the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister for working together in unison now and doing what it takes to guide us all through this crisis. I have a few questions I would like sort of clarity on. The key workers issue, where the schools have been opened in a semi-open nature to provide childminding facilities for our key workers. I want to question the wisdom of pulling all the children together of key workers at one location, and also just to point out that some teachers, staff and principals do feel very compromised, and equally frontline healthcare workers feel let down because there aren't those facilities in place. Can we build a sustainable solution and safe solution that is implementable even after a lockdown scenario? In terms of the implementation of measures, the business rates grants, the 80% of salaries available to employees, what provisions will be available for self-employed and freelance people? I suggest that there should be 80% of last year's earnings available to those people with up to a £2,500 limit. But those are all very positive initiatives, but people want to know when they are going to be implemented. When will those monies be available to them? Testing has been raised already. 41 testing stations are available in the Republic, with more due to be open today. Are there any in the North? Healthcare workers need not to be quarantined because they have a head cold. We need those testing facilities widely available, and specifically and particularly for our healthcare workers. The PPE. Some frontline medical professionals are refusing to make patient contact or even have assessments because they don't have the correct equipment. They can't protect themselves. What initiatives and thinking outside the box, as you've already referred to earlier, Deputy First Minister, have O'Neill's been engaged to prepare, the company O'Neill's, which has staff who are ready and waiting to deliver this equipment to our frontline healthcare workers? Has that been put in motion to get that equipment available to people when they need it most? And that is now. And to reiterate again a point that's been made in this chamber, the penny does not seem to have dropped with large sections of our society. Did you not recognise that this is do or die time? And it's crystal clear. Stay apart to stay alive. So I hope you can re-emphasise that point, Deputy First Minister. I want to wish you well, and wish the First Minister well, and wish all of us well in this huge, huge challenge we all share together.
Thanks to the member for the question, and I'm happy to repeat some of the things that I've said, particularly in relation to PPE. What we're saying is that we need our healthcare staff, so we must protect them. Not just our healthcare staff, anybody who's in the front line, any of our emergency services, those domiciliary care workers that are going house to house caring for people, they need to have protection. So we have committed to doing everything that we can to make sure that we have adequate protection, that it's ample and that there's no fear there at all in terms of people being protected to do their job. We have just this morning signed a contract in terms of PPE, and that's going to see additional PPE being brought in. We're also, as I said, working with and have been speaking with O'Neill's and others who perhaps can also support us at this time. So there's a number of things underway that will actually help the PPE situation and give that assurance that our healthcare staff need, and that we are actually doing the right thing to protect those people who are helping protect our families. On the testing centres, we have to ramp up the testing. I can't say it enough. We must do much more testing. We must isolate people and we must contact trace. So we have to do all those things. People are looking to see, they're looking at elsewhere, they're looking at the level of testing. We don't have that here. We need to get that here, and we will get that here. They're looking towards Croke Park and saying, where's our Croke Park, where are our centres? And I believe that the Minister for Health will make some more positive announcements in terms of that over the course of the next number of days. On the school closures, let's be very clear. Schools are closed, but we are using school facilities to help deal with the emergency situation and support our key workers. We have to be nimble right now. It isn't all clear-cut. There's no doubt about it. It's confusing for people. But my appeal to everybody who works in the public service, right across the civil service and public services, we need you. We need you to help us through this period. We need you to help key workers do their job. We need you to help save lives. And that means that we don't all be doing what we always do all the time. Teachers might be asked to do something that's not their normal run of duty. Somebody who works in the civil service might be asked to do something completely different and alien to what they've ever done before. But we need people to respond in this way at this time. So this is not normal, and people need to stop thinking that it's normal. This is not normal times, so we have to behave in that way. So we need absolutely everybody to put their shoulder to the wheel, everybody to do their bit, and that means stepping outside of our comfort zone, and that means just doing the right thing because we're trying to save lives.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister for your statement today and for being here today. It is, as already mentioned, it has been widely acknowledged that the general public are very reassured to see you standing so strong, shoulder to shoulder, over the past few days and throughout this time. And I would like to commend you for working so well and being so strong, particularly under such extreme pressure. I can only imagine the emotion that goes behind every decision that you have to take and make and carry out over the coming weeks. But for that and the work that you're putting in, I do thank you. There are, of course, ongoing issues and things will change. And I'd maybe like to ask if there are any plans in motion at the minute to launch a series of public announcement campaigns to maybe keep the public updated and informed, particularly as we see what we have seen over the weekend in terms of large gatherings. And that's not just young people, and that's not just in open spaces. We're already talking and have seen this being carried out in our supermarkets and other areas as well. I'd maybe want to ask also, in terms of the fiscal packages, what are we doing to address and work for those who are renting and who are still expected to pay that rent? When we have seen the mortgage holiday given to those with mortgages, we have this bizarre situation where we're seeing workers who have lost their jobs continuing to have to pay rents to some landlords who've been given a mortgage freeze. This is not okay either. So what are we doing in terms of that specifically? And what are we doing, or has conversations happened at an executive level to mitigate or to move Northern Ireland into a full lockdown situation? We're hearing Boris Johnson announcing that flights and airports could be closed, that London could be moved into lockdown. Are we having those conversations ourselves? And maybe the last thing to address is going back into the testing and everything that has been said already around the testing, but I would like to maybe ask, are the executive looking at any particular epidemiological modelling to predict and plan for this virus and its spread, and particularly given how we will plan to measure this going ahead and allocate resource to that? But thank you, and thank you for the work so far.
Thanks very much for the question. Just on renters, we're working our way through that, and we've heard some disturbing views from like Housing Rights Service and others who are saying that there are some unscrupulous landlords moving to actually try to evict people at this time. So the Minister for Communities will bring forward legislation that will give protection to people that they cannot be evicted in this period of time. So that's important. We're working with the Housing Executive, housing associations and others, and looking at the whole issue of rents as well. So what we need to do is to help people to get through this in the best way we can. The financial package last week in terms of income was very, very important, but we also need payment holidays for mortgages and for rents and for things just to help people just to survive through this period, and we'll continue to do that, and we'll keep the Assembly updated as we move our way through that. The public ad campaign, we will be launching an executive campaign, and you'll see that really ramped up over the course of the next couple of days. You'll see it everywhere. It's all part of and parcel of the work that we've done around the portal, the one-stop shop of information. So everything consistent messaging, letting people see exactly the factual position of all these things. So you'll see that rolled out, and I think that will be very much welcome to drive home messages. And then in terms of full lockdown, or how you describe it, as of now, nobody should be waiting. I mean, we'll have additional powers tomorrow, but as of now, anybody who's not involved in essential services should not be out and about. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. As of now, people should not be out if they don't have to be. We will have additional powers tomorrow. We gives us the flexibility to move our way through this and take the right decisions with the right powers behind us, and that's really, really important. But I also want to drive home a message that let's not strike a fear into people where people run out and start to panic buy food. We have solid food supply chains. We have medical supply chains. We're working with the hauliers, with the retailers, with everybody to work our way through this. That will not be a problem in terms of the work that we're doing. So please, 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 my message to people is please don't go out and panic buy. Not everybody can. And then if you're sitting and you're waiting, you're thinking you're not going to be able to get anything at the shops for your family, that's already adding the tension on to people that they don't need. So there is enough food. We will have sustained food supplies, sustained medical supplies, and we're working with all the relevant partners to make sure that's the case.